I am Emma Carter, 28 years old. For my entire life, my father told me that I was the problem child, the one who caused drama, the one who made things difficult. He said I had a talent for ruining perfect moments, especially compared to my sister Claire, who was sunshine and rainbows and could do no wrong. But the worst humiliation didn't come from those words said behind closed doors. It came on a September night in Portland, Oregon, when I was 15 years old, standing in a gas station parking lot while a thunderstorm ripped the sky apart above me. Right in the middle of our family road trip, with my aunt and uncle following in their car behind us, Claire told our parents that I had stolen $200 from her purse. She said it in that sweet, trembling voice she reserved for moments when she wanted maximum sympathy. My father pulled into a BP station off Interstate 84, got out of the car in the pouring rain, opened my door, and said, "Get out. If you want to act like you don't belong in this family, then you can find your own way home." My mother sat in the passenger seat, stone-faced, scrolling through her phone. My aunt pulled down her window and asked what was happening. My father told her, "Emma stole from her sister. We're teaching her a lesson about consequences." Claire pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide, her hand over her mouth, the picture of innocent shock. I stood there in the rain, soaking wet, watching our Jeep Cherokee pull away. My uncle's Camry followed. Taillights disappeared into the storm. They had no idea that the problem child they just abandoned on the side of a highway was standing 20 feet away from Oregon State Police Sergeant Michael Torres, who had just pulled into the gas station for coffee and watched the entire thing happen from his patrol car. I was the only minor he'd see thrown out like garbage that night. And 15 years later, when my father's hand shook as he stared up at the name on my office door, he finally understood what that choice had cost him. If you've ever been abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do while the real culprit got away with it, I need you to hit that like button right now. Let's show every Claire in the world that the truth always comes out. Drop a comment that says, "I survived," so we can build a community of people who refuse to stay victims. The BP station smelled like burnt coffee and diesel fuel. The fluorescent lights inside flickered against the darkness outside, and the rain hammered the metal awning above the gas pump so hard it sounded like gunfire. I stood there in my soaked hoodie and jeans, my backpack heavy on my shoulders, watching the red taillights of my family's cars disappear into the storm. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, though I was freezing, from the shock, from the realization that they'd actually done it. They'd actually left me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was like something had shut down inside my chest. I heard a car door slam, boots on wet pavement, a voice behind me, calm and steady. "Hey, you okay?" I turned around. Sergeant Michael Torres was maybe 45, with grey threading through his dark hair and eyes that had seen too much, but somehow still looked kind. He wore his rain-slicked uniform jacket and held a coffee cup from inside the station. He wasn't rushing toward me. He wasn't demanding answers. He was just there, present, waiting. "I'm fine," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "That your family that just drove off?" I nodded. "They coming back?" I shook my head. He was quiet for a moment, rain dripping off the brim of his campaign hat. Then he said, "How old are you?" 15. His jaw tightened. He looked down the highway where my family had disappeared, then back at me. "What's your name?" "Emma Carter." "Emma, I'm Sergeant Torres. I need you to come sit in my car for a minute while we figure this out, okay? You're soaked and you're shivering, and I can't just leave you here." I followed him to his patrol car. The interior smelled like leather and that specific cop car smell of coffee and paperwork and long shifts. He turned the heat on full blast and handed me a blanket from the trunk. It was rough and grey and probably department issued, but it was warm. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked. So I did. I told him about Claire's lie, about the $200 I never took, about my father pulling over and throwing me out, about my mother saying nothing, about my aunt and uncle just following along like this was normal. Sergeant Torres listened without interrupting. When I finished, he pulled out his radio and made a call. 10 minutes later, another patrol car pulled up. A female officer got out, and Sergeant Torres stepped away to talk to her in low voices. I caught fragments. Minor abandonment, family services, temporary placement. My stomach dropped. Foster care. That's what this meant. But then Sergeant Torres came back and crouched down next to the open car door. "Emma, here's what's going to happen. Officer Ramirez is going to take you to a safe place tonight. Tomorrow, someone from the Department of Human Services is going to talk to you and contact your parents. This is serious. What they did tonight is illegal. Do you understand?" I nodded. "Good. I'm also going to need your parents' phone number and your home address." I gave them to him. He wrote everything down in a small notebook, his handwriting precise and careful. Then he did something I didn't expect. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Emma, I don't know what you did or didn't do, and honestly, it doesn't matter. There's no situation where it's okay for parents to abandon a 15-year-old kid on the side of a highway in a storm. You didn't deserve this. You hear me?" Something cracked inside my chest. I nodded again, not trusting my voice. "One more thing," he said. "I want you to remember my name. Michael Torres. If you ever need anything, you call the Oregon State Police and you ask for me. Okay?" "Okay," I whispered. Officer Ramirez drove me to a group home in Hood River. I spent 3 days there before my parents came to pick me up. They were forced to. Child Protective Services had opened an investigation. My father looked furious the entire drive home. My mother looked embarrassed. Claire sat in the back seat next to me, silent for once. Nobody apologized. When we got home, my father sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "You almost destroyed this family with your stunt. Do you have any idea what you put us through? We had to explain to a social worker why we were being investigated like we're criminals." I stared at him. "I didn't take Claire's money." "That's not the point," he snapped. "The point is you caused a scene. You got the police involved. You made us look bad." My mother added, "From now on, Emma, you need to think before you act. This family has a reputation in this community and you nearly ruined it." I looked at Claire. She was examining her nails, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. That night, I lay in bed and made a promise to myself. I would never, ever be in a position where they could throw me away again. I would become so successful, so powerful, so untouchable that they would regret every single moment they treated me like I didn't matter. I just had no idea how long it would take or how much it would cost. This is where it starts, isn't it? The moment where you realize the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally actually have a very long list of conditions. If you've ever been gaslit by a family member who made you question your own reality, hit that like button. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever been blamed for someone else's lie? Let's validate each other's experiences right here, right now. My mind drifted back to 6 months before that storm. March, my 15th birthday. We were at the Chart House in Portland, the fancy restaurant overlooking the Willamette River that my parents only took us to for special occasions. The kind of place with cloth napkins and waiters who refill your water glass before you even realize it's empty. The dining room had floor-to-ceiling windows, and the city lights sparkled across the water like scattered diamonds. My whole family was there. Parents, Claire, my father's brother, Uncle Robert, and his wife, Aunt Linda, my maternal grandmother, who lived in Seattle and had driven down for the occasion. Claire had turned 17 2 months earlier. Her birthday dinner had been at the same restaurant. The waiter brought out a dessert plate with a candle in it, and everyone sang "Happy Birthday." My father made a toast about how proud he was of both his daughters, how we were growing into remarkable young women, how the future was bright. Then came the gifts. My grandmother went first. She gave me a Barnes & Noble gift card for $25 and a hardcover journal with a quote on the cover about dreams. "For your writing, sweetie," she said. I loved writing. I filled notebooks with stories and poems. It was a thoughtful gift. My aunt and uncle gave me a Starbucks gift card for $15 and a pair of fuzzy socks. My mother gave me a new backpack for school. It was nice, practical, navy blue with good zippers. Then my father pulled out an envelope. "This one's from your mum and me," he said, sliding it across the table. I opened it. Inside was a Visa gift card for $100 and a note that said, "For whatever you need, love, Mum and Dad." I smiled. It was generous, more than I'd expected. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "Of course, sweetheart," my father said, squeezing my shoulder. Then my mother turned to Claire. "Claire, honey, we have something for you too." I blinked. "Wait, it's my birthday." "I know," my mother said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But Claire's been working so hard on her college applications, and we wanted to acknowledge that." My father pulled out a small box, wrapped in silver paper. Claire opened it slowly, milking the moment. Inside was a key, an actual car key with a Mercedes-Benz logo on the fob. The table went silent. "You bought her a car?" I said, my voice coming out higher than I intended. "A used one," my father said quickly, as if that made it better. "A 2010 C-Class. Claire's going to need reliable transportation when she starts at University of Oregon in the fall. We found a great deal." My grandmother made a soft "oh my" sound. Claire threw her arms around our father's neck. "Oh my God, Dad, thank you. Thank you so much." My mother beamed. "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've worked so hard." I sat there, staring at my $100 Visa gift card, at my practical backpack, at the fuzzy socks. The math was simple. A 2010 Mercedes C-Class, even used, was worth at least $15,000, probably more, and they'd given it to her on my birthday, as a reward for filling out college applications. I excused myself to the bathroom. The restroom at the chart house was all marble and gold fixtures and soft lighting. I locked myself in a stall and pressed my palms against my eyes, willing myself not to cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. I would not be the dramatic one, the problem child, the one who ruined perfect moments. But something inside me was screaming. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't even about the money. It was about what it meant. It was about being told in front of my entire family that Claire mattered more, that her achievements deserved $15,000 and mine deserved $100, that even on my birthday she was still the star. I looked at myself in the mirror, 15 years old, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the dress my mother had picked out because it was appropriate, eyes red-rimmed but dry. I made a vow right there, staring at my reflection. One day, I would be successful enough that they couldn't ignore me, important enough that they couldn't dismiss me, powerful enough that they would have to respect me whether they wanted to or not. I would become someone they couldn't throw away. When I came back to the table, Claire was showing everyone pictures of the car on her phone. Silver, beautiful, completely out of my reach. My father caught my eye and said, "You understand, don't you, Emma? Claire's at a different stage in her life." I nodded. I understand. And I did. I understood perfectly. They had no idea what was coming. This is the moment where something breaks, isn't it? When you realize that love in your family has a price tag and you're not worth as much as someone else. If you've ever been the one who got the gift card while your sibling got the car, the one who got the participation trophy while your sibling got the celebration, I need you to hit that like button right now. Let's create a wall of solidarity for everyone who has ever felt like the backup child. Write "I was enough" in the comments. Let's remind each other of that truth. The storm happened 6 months after that birthday dinner, after the BP station, after Officer Ramirez and the group home, and the investigation that my parents insisted on calling Emma's incident. Things got worse at home. My father barely spoke to me. When he did, it was to remind me how much trouble I'd caused. My mother perfected the art of talking around me, as if I were a piece of furniture she had to navigate. Claire went back to being the golden child, but now with an edge of smugness. She knew she'd won. But what they didn't know was that I'd made another call from that group home during those 3 days. To Sergeant Torres. He came to visit me on the second day, brought me a sandwich from Subway, and sat across from me in the common room while I ate. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm okay," I said. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie you tell when you're trying to survive. "Emma, I'm going to be straight with you. Your parents are going to take you home. The investigation will probably get dropped because they'll agree to family counselling or something. The system doesn't have enough resources to follow every case like yours, especially when parents play along with the process." "I know," I said quietly, "but that doesn't mean what happened was okay. And it doesn't mean you have to forget it." He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "I want you to think about something. You're 15. You've got 3 years until you're 18. 3 years until you can make your own choices about where you live and what you do. That's not a long time. It's going to feel long, but it's not. And when those 3 years are up, you get to decide who you become." "What if I don't know who that is?" I asked. "Then you figure it out. But here's what I know about you already. You're tough. You didn't cry when they left you. You didn't fall apart when I found you. You told me the truth, even though you were scared. That's character, Emma. That's strength. Don't let them convince you otherwise." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Oregon State Police, Sergeant Michael Torres, direct line, email. You keep this. When you turn 18, if you want help figuring out your next steps, you call me. I know people. I can connect you with resources, scholarships, job programs, whatever you need." I took the card. It felt like a lifeline. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because 25 years ago, I was a kid standing in the rain and nobody stopped. Nobody asked if I was okay. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to be the person who stopped, I would. So, here I am." I kept that card in my wallet for the next 3 years. Going home was exactly as bad as Sergeant Torres predicted. My parents took me to 2 family counselling sessions where they performed perfectly, agreeing with everything the therapist said, nodding sympathetically, promising to work on communication. Claire apologised in front of the therapist for the misunderstanding, but never admitted she'd lied. At home, nothing changed. I kept my head down. I focused on school. I got straight A's because good grades were armour. I worked part-time at a coffee shop in downtown Portland, saving every penny in an account my parents didn't know about. I wrote scholarship essays. I researched colleges far away from Oregon. The day I turned 18, I was a senior at Lincoln High School. It was October. I had already been accepted early decision to New York University with a full academic scholarship and financial aid package that covered everything. I'd kept it quiet, told no one. That night at dinner, my father announced that Claire had been accepted to medical school at Oregon Health and Science University. They were throwing her a celebration party. My mother was already planning the menu. "Emma, you'll help set up, won't you?" my mother asked absently. "Actually, I have news too," I said. Everyone looked at me. "I got accepted to NYU, full scholarship. I'm moving to New York in August." Silence. My father put down his fork. "New York? That's across the country." "I know." "You can't just move across the country, Emma. You're barely an adult." "I'm 18. Legally, I can." My mother frowned. "What about community college? You could stay here, save money, and then transfer somewhere closer in a few years." "I don't want to stay here," I said. Claire smirked. "Good luck surviving in New York. You can barely handle Portland." Something cold settled in my chest. "We'll see," I said. The next 8 months were tense. My parents tried everything to make me stay. Guilt, logic, financial pressure. They reminded me constantly that I was making a mistake, that I wasn't ready, that I'd come running home within a semester. I worked double shifts at the coffee shop. I packed my life into 2 suitcases. I said goodbye to exactly 3 people from high school who actually mattered. And on August 15th, I got on a plane to JFK with $500 in my pocket and Sergeant Torres' business card still in my wallet. New York was brutal. I lived in a dorm room the size of a closet with a roommate from Connecticut who thought I was weird for being so quiet. I worked 3 part-time jobs: campus library, weekend catering gigs, and overnight shifts at a 24-hour diner in Greenwich Village. I survived on coffee and bagels and 4 hours of sleep. But I thrived academically. I double majored in business administration and psychology because I wanted to understand how systems worked and how people thought. I joined the debate team. I networked obsessively, collecting business cards and LinkedIn connections like they were currency. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving my freshman year, or Christmas. I told my parents I couldn't afford the plane ticket. They didn't offer to buy one. Sophomore year, I landed an internship at a consulting firm in Midtown. Junior year, that internship turned into a part-time position. Senior year, they offered me a job starting after graduation. By the time I was 22, I was a junior analyst at Morrison & Keene, one of the top management consulting firms in New York. I worked 80-hour weeks. I learned how corporate power worked. I learned how to read a room, how to pitch ideas, how to make executives listen. By 24, I was a senior analyst. By 26, I was a consultant with my own clients. And at 27, I got a call from a headhunter about a position back in Portland. Executive Director of the Oregon Department of Human Services. The same agency that had investigated my parents 8 years earlier. The same agency that was supposed to protect kids like I'd been. The salary was less than I made in New York. The work would be harder. The politics would be brutal. I took the interview. I spent 3 months in a rigorous vetting process. Background checks, panel interviews, meetings with the governor's office. I was competing against candidates who'd been in Oregon child welfare for decades, who knew the system inside and out. But I had something they didn't. I'd lived it. I knew what it felt like to fall through the cracks. I knew exactly what was broken and how to fix it. 3 weeks before my 28th birthday, I got the call. The job was mine. I called Sergeant Torres before I called anyone else. He was a lieutenant now, still with the Oregon State Police. "Emma Carter," he said when he answered. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." "I got it," I told him. "I knew you would," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I moved back to Portland in January. I didn't tell my family I was coming home. I didn't tell them about the job. I wanted to walk into that office and prove, once and for all, that the girl they'd thrown away had become someone they couldn't ignore. My first day was a Monday. I wore a charcoal suit and heels that made me 3 inches taller. My office was on the 7th floor of a building in downtown Portland, with windows overlooking the city. The nameplate on my door read, Emma Carter, Executive Director. I sat down at my desk, looked out at the rain-soaked streets below, and thought about that 15-year-old girl standing in a BP station parking lot. I'd kept my promise to her. Now it was time to make good on the second promise, the one I'd made to myself in that restaurant bathroom 6 months before the storm. They were going to see exactly what they'd lost. This is where the work happens, isn't it? The part nobody sees. The years of grinding, surviving, building yourself from nothing, while everyone who dismissed you forgot you even existed. If you've ever had to leave everything behind to become who you were meant to be, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to do alone? Let's honour the journey, not just the destination. My first 3 months as executive director were consumed by fires that needed putting out. Budget shortfalls, staff turnover, a foster care system that was collapsing under its own weight. I spent 14-hour days in meetings, reading case files, implementing new policies. But I also spent time doing something else, building relationships with people who mattered. Lieutenant Michael Torres was at the top of that list. We met for coffee at a diner in northeast Portland on a Saturday morning in March, almost exactly 13 years after he'd found me in that storm. "You look good," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Executive director suits you." "I learned from the best," I said. "You taught me that showing up matters." We talked about the work, about the gaps in the system, about the kids who slipped through. He told me about cases he'd seen over the years that haunted him. I told him about the reforms I was planning. Then he said something that changed everything. "You know, the weirdest thing happened last month. I got a call from a case supervisor about a family situation in Lake Oswego. Wealthy family. Allegations of favoritism and emotional abuse from one of the kids. No physical harm, so it didn't meet the threshold for removal. But the kid was clearly suffering." My coffee went cold in my hands. "What family?" "I probably shouldn't say." He looked at me carefully. "But the last name was Carter." My heart stopped. "Claire, the younger sister. She's at OHSU med school, right? Apparently, she called in a complaint about her parents, said they'd been financially manipulating her, controlling her bank accounts, threatening to cut her off from school funding if she didn't do what they wanted. Said there was a history of this kind of thing with both kids." I set my cup down slowly. "Claire called DHS?" "Yeah. The case supervisor looked into it. Interviewed your parents. They denied everything, said Claire was being dramatic, going through stress from school. The supervisor couldn't substantiate enough to take action, so the case was closed. But it pinged my desk because..." He trailed off. "Because you remember me," I finished, "because I remember you." I sat back in the booth, my mind racing. Claire had called DHS. Claire who'd lied about the $200. Claire who'd smirked when they'd left me in the storm. Claire who'd spent 13 years being the golden child. "Can you send me the case file?" I asked. "Emma, I shouldn't..." "Michael, if there's a pattern of abuse in that family, I need to know. Not as their daughter. As the executive director of the agency responsible for investigating it." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll send it to your office email. Officially." The file arrived on Monday. I read it in my office with the door closed. Claire's complaint was detailed, specific. She described years of conditional love, financial control, impossible standards, being pitted against me to maintain her position as the favourite. She said she'd finally snapped when our parents demanded she give them access to her medical school loan refunds to help the family, while simultaneously buying themselves a new boat. She said she was drowning, that she couldn't do it anymore, that she needed help. The case supervisor's notes were clinical. Parents deny all allegations. Subject appears stressed but functional. No evidence of immediate harm. Case closed. I called Claire that night, used my personal cell, not the office line. She answered on the third ring. Emma? Her voice was shocked. How did you get this number? I'm back in Portland, I said. I need to talk to you. We met at a coffee shop in the Pearl District the next evening. Claire looked tired, thinner than I remembered. Her perfect golden girl glow had dimmed. We sat down, ordered coffee, stared at each other. I heard about the DHS complaint, I said. Her face went pale. How did you? I'm the executive director now, of DHS. She blinked, once, twice. You're kidding. I'm not. She laughed, but it came out bitter. Of course you are. Of course you became the person in charge of the agency that was supposed to help us. Us? You think you were the only one they hurt? Her voice cracked. You think being the favourite was easy? Do you have any idea what it's like to know that you're only loved because you perform? That the second you stop being perfect, you'll end up exactly where you did? I sat very still. Claire kept going. I lied about that money, Emma. I stole it and blamed you because I needed gas money, and I was too scared to ask Dad because he'd already yelled at me that week for getting a B in pre-calc. And when you got thrown out of the car, I thought... She stopped, her hands shaking. I thought Mom would stop them. I thought she'd say it was too far, but she didn't. And I realised that if I ever messed up that badly, I'd be next. So you spent 13 years being perfect, I said quietly. I spent 13 years in a cage. She wiped her eyes. And now I'm 28, drowning in medical school debt, and they're still controlling me. Still telling me who to date, what specialty to choose, how to spend my money. I can't do it anymore, Emma. I can't. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hold on to the anger I'd carried for 13 years. But looking at her, I just saw another girl standing in the rain, waiting for someone to save her. The case was closed, I said. The supervisor said there wasn't enough evidence. I know. I figured it would be. They're too good at hiding it. Too respectable. What if it got reopened? I asked. She looked up. What? What if I told you that I have the authority to review closed cases when there's new evidence? What if I told you that a pattern of behaviour spanning multiple children constitutes new evidence? Emma, you can't... I'm not going to falsify anything. I'm not going to manufacture evidence. But I am going to look at what happened to both of us with fresh eyes and document it properly. And if it meets the threshold for an investigation, I'm going to do my job. Claire stared at me. Why would you help me? After what I did? Because someone helped me when I was standing in the rain, I said. And because this isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no other kid has to stand in that parking lot. She started crying. Real tears, not the calculated ones she used to use. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Emma. I reached across the table and took her hand. I know. Over the next 2 months, I quietly documented everything. Claire's complaint, my own history, interviews with our aunt and uncle, who admitted they'd witnessed concerning behaviour, but didn't want to interfere. School records showing Claire's anxiety-related absences. Financial records showing my parents' pattern of using money as control. I assigned the case to a senior investigator who didn't know my connection to it. I recused myself from any direct decisions. I did everything by the book. But I also made sure that, this time, the book was followed completely. In May, my parents received a letter from Oregon DHS informing them that a historical review of child welfare concerns related to their family had been initiated. They were requested to participate in an interview. My father called my office the same day. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Emma, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is inappropriate. We're your parents. You need to call this off immediately." I didn't call him back. My mother tried next. Her message was different. "Emma, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk about this? As a family?" I didn't call her back either. The investigation proceeded. My parents hired a lawyer. The lawyer sent threatening letters about conflict of interest, about abuse of power, about how this would ruin my career. I forwarded them to our legal department. They sent back a response explaining that the executive director had properly recused herself, that the investigation was being handled by appropriate staff, and that the family's cooperation was required by law. In June, the investigator's report landed on my deputy director's desk. She read it, then brought it to me. "This is complicated," she said, sitting across from me in my office. "There's no smoking gun, no physical abuse, but there's a clear pattern of emotional manipulation and financial control spanning both children. It meets the threshold for substantiated emotional abuse." "What's the recommendation?" I asked. "The children are adults now, so there's no removal action. But we're required to document this in the state registry. Any future child welfare involvement with this family will have this history attached, and we're recommending they complete a parenting education program." "Do it," I said. "Emma, you know they're going to come after you for this." "Let them." The official finding letter went out in July. I was copied on it as executive director. I read it 3 times, letting the words sink in. Substantiated emotional abuse. Pattern of favoritism, financial manipulation, failure to provide appropriate emotional support. That night, I drove to the BP station off Interstate 84. It looked exactly the same. Same flickering lights, same smell of diesel. I parked where Sergeant Torres' patrol car had been and sat there for a while, remembering. Then I drove home. 2 days later, my father showed up at my office. This is the part where the hunter becomes the hunted, where the person who thought they were untouchable realizes the ground is shifting under their feet. If you've ever had to use the system that failed you to finally get justice, hit that like button and tell me, have you ever had to be the bigger person for someone who hurt you? Drop breaking cycles in the comments. Let's acknowledge how hard that is. My assistant buzzed my office line at 2:37 p.m. on a Thursday. "Emma, there's a David Carter here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I looked up from the budget report I was reviewing. My father. "Here." "Give me 5 minutes, then send him in," I said. I stood up, walked to the window, took 3 deep breaths, straightened my jacket, sat back down at my desk, positioned myself so the light from the window would be behind me, putting my face in shadow while his would be fully lit. The door opened. My father walked in, and for the first time in my life, I saw him as he actually was. Not the towering authority figure of my childhood. Just a man in his late 50s, wearing an expensive suit that fit a little too tight around the middle, his hair greying at the temples, his face flushed with barely controlled anger. "Hello, Dad," I said calmly. "Don't," he said, his voice sharp. "Don't hello Dad me like this is a normal visit. Please, sit down." "I'll stand." I shrugged. "Suit yourself." He stared at me across my desk, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any concept of the damage you've caused?" "I'm aware of the investigation findings, if that's what you mean." "Investigation?" He laughed, bitter and harsh. "You mean your personal vendetta, your abuse of power, using your position to settle old scores. I recused myself from the investigation, I said evenly. The findings were made by a senior investigator with 15 years of experience who had no knowledge of my relationship to the family until after the report was filed. Bullshit. He leaned forward, palms flat on my desk. You orchestrated this whole thing. You convinced Claire to lie about us. You manipulated the system, and now you're trying to destroy your own parents' reputation because you're still bitter about something that happened when you were a teenager. I met his eyes, held them, let the silence stretch. Sit down, Dad. I told you I'll... Sit down. My voice didn't rise, didn't need to. Something in my tone made him hesitate. Then, slowly, he lowered himself into the chair across from my desk. Let's talk about what happened when I was a teenager, I said. Let's talk about the night you pulled over on Interstate 84, opened my car door, and told me to get out in the middle of a thunderstorm. Do you remember that night? His jaw tightened. You stole from your sister. I didn't. Claire admitted that to me 2 months ago. She stole the money herself and blamed me because she was afraid of your reaction. She wouldn't. She did, and you didn't even investigate. You didn't ask questions. You just assumed I was guilty and threw me out of the car. I leaned forward. Do you have any idea what could have happened to me that night? A 15-year-old girl on the side of a highway in a storm. We were teaching you about consequences. You were abandoning a minor. That's what the Oregon State Police called it when Sergeant Torres found me 20 minutes later. That's what Child Protective Services called it when they opened an investigation. And that's what it actually was, no matter how you justify it to yourself. His face went pale. Torres, the cop? Yes, the cop who saved me. The cop who told me that I didn't deserve what you did. The cop who gave me his card and told me that when I turned 18, I could call him if I needed help. I pulled out my wallet, extracted the business card, worn and faded but still intact after 13 years, and placed it on the desk between us. I kept it, all this time. He stared at the card like it was a snake. Michael Torres is Lieutenant Michael Torres now, I continued. He's the one who flagged Claire's complaint when it came through the system. He's the one who remembered that this family had a history. He's the one who made sure it landed on the right desk. This is entrapment. This is documentation. This is finally, after 13 years, someone paying attention to a pattern of behaviour that should have been addressed the first time. I pulled out a file from my drawer and opened it. Let me read you something from the investigator's report. Subject 1, the eldest child was systematically marginalised and emotionally neglected, while Subject 2, the younger child, was given preferential treatment contingent upon performance. Both subjects describe a household environment in which love and financial support were transactional, creating lasting psychological harm. On March 17, 2011, Subject 1 was given a $100 gift card for her 15th birthday. On the same evening, Subject 2 was given a vehicle valued at approximately $16,000 as a reward for college applications, despite it not being her birthday. When interviewed, Subject 1 described this incident as a defining moment in which she understood her worth within the family structure. My father's face had gone from red to grey. Should I continue? I asked. Because there are 23 pages of this. Specific incidents, specific patterns, all substantiated by interviews with both Claire and me, with your brother and sister-in-law, with school counsellors, with financial records. Emma, on September 23rd, 2011, you committed child abandonment. You left a 15-year-old on the side of a highway, That investigation was closed because you cooperated with the mandatory counselling sessions. But it's still on file, still part of the pattern. And when Claire filed her complaint 3 months ago, that history came back up. Because that's how patterns work, Dad. They don't disappear just because you want them to. He slumped in the chair. The fight was draining out of him. What do you want? He asked quietly. I don't want anything. The investigation is complete. The findings are entered into the state registry. You and Mum are required to complete a parenting education program, which is mostly a formality at this point, since Claire and I are adults. That's it. That's the consequence. But everyone will know. Our friends, the community, your mother's book club, my golf club. Everyone will know we were investigated for child abuse. Yes, I said simply. They will. You're destroying us? No. I'm documenting what you did, just there's a difference. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been recognition in his eyes. When did you become so cold? September 23rd, 2011, I said, around 8:47 p.m. in a BP station parking lot off Interstate 84. He flinched. Here's what's going to happen now, I said, my voice calm and measured. You're going to leave my office. You're going to complete the required parenting program. You're going to accept that this investigation was legitimate and that the findings are accurate. And then you're going to go home and think very carefully about whether you want to contact me again. Emma, you're still our daughter? Am I? I stood up, because daughters aren't thrown away when they become inconvenient. Daughters aren't abandoned in storms. Daughters aren't told they're worth $100, while their sisters are worth $16,000. So, let's not pretend this relationship is something it never was. He stood too, shakily. Your mother will want to talk to you. Mum knows where I work. She has my number. She's had it for 13 years. If she wants to talk, she knows how to reach me. He walked to the door, then turned back. I thought we were teaching you to be strong, to be independent. You taught me that I was alone, I said. That's not the same thing. He left without another word. I sat back down at my desk and stared at Sergeant Torres' business card still lying there on the polished wood. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the desk until they stopped. My assistant buzzed again. Emma, your 3 o'clock is here. Give me 5 minutes, I said. I walked to the window and looked out at Portland. The rain had started again, drumming against the glass. Somewhere out there, on Interstate 84, there was a BP station where a 15-year-old girl had stood in a storm, waiting for someone to care. I'd finally answered that call. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail at my home address, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page. Emma, your father told me about his visit to your office. He said you were cruel. I think you were honest. There's a difference. I should have stopped him that night. I should have made him turn the car around. I should have protected you. I didn't. I've spent 13 years telling myself that we were doing the right thing, teaching you a lesson. But all we taught you was that we couldn't be trusted. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But I want you to know that I see what we did. I see what it cost you. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry we weren't the parents you needed. I'm sorry we made you choose between being yourself and being loved. I'm sorry we threw you away. Claire is moving to Seattle for her residency. She says she needs distance from us to heal. I understand. I hope you understand too. We're enrolling in the parenting program next week. It feels absurd at our age. But your father and I both agree that we need to understand what we did wrong. Maybe it's too late for us to fix things with you and your sister. But maybe we can at least stop making it worse. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that I'm finally listening. Mum, I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer in my desk. 3 months later, I got a call from Claire. She was settled in Seattle, starting her residency at Swedish Medical Center. She sounded lighter, freer. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for reopening the case, for forcing everyone to finally look at what they'd been ignoring." "You did the hard part," I said. "You filed the complaint." "Yeah, but you made sure it mattered. You made sure someone listened." She paused. "Dad called me last week. Said he and Mum finished the parenting program. Said it was eye-opening. I think that's the closest he'll ever get to admitting he was wrong." "That's probably true. Emma, I know this doesn't fix everything. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to be better. I'm in therapy. I'm working on it." "That's all any of us can do," I said. We talked for another 20 minutes, about her residency, about my work, about the weather in Seattle versus Portland, normal things, sister things. When we hung up, I realised that for the first time in 13 years, a conversation with Claire hadn't left me feeling hollow. Progress was strange like that. Incremental, imperfect, but real. This is the moment where everything comes full circle, where the powerless become powerful, where the ignored become impossible to ignore, where justice finally shows up 13 years late, but still shows up. If you've ever had to be the adult in the room while your parents acted like children, hit that like button. And tell me, what would you say to the person who hurt you if you knew they had to listen? Drop it in the comments. Sometimes just naming it is enough. 6 months after my father's visit to my office, I got an email from him. Subject line, "Can we talk?" The body of the email was short. "Emma, I've been working with a therapist since we finished the parenting program. She's helping me understand some things I didn't want to see. I'd like to talk to you in person. No agenda, just talk. If you're willing, I'll be at the coffee shop on 23rd and Burnside this Saturday at 10 a.m. I'll wait for an hour. If you don't come, I'll understand." Dad. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, to let him sit in that coffee shop and feel what it was like to wait for someone who never came, to give him a taste of abandonment. But I thought about Sergeant Torres, about the choice he'd made to stop when no one had stopped for him, about how helping me had been his way of breaking a cycle. I could keep the cycle going, or I could try to break it. On Saturday morning, I drove to the coffee shop. It was drizzling, the kind of soft Portland rain that's more mist than water. I parked across the street and watched through the window. My father was already there, sitting at a corner table, staring at a cup of coffee. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, smaller somehow, like the confrontation in my office had taken something essential out of him. I got out of the car, walked across the street, and pushed open the door. The bell chimed. He looked up. "You came," he said. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Uncertainty. "I almost didn't," I said honestly. "I wouldn't have blamed you." I got myself a coffee and sat down across from him. We were silent for a moment, two people who shared DNA and history, but had no idea how to talk to each other. "I've been meeting with Dr. Patel for 4 months now," he finally said, "the therapist. She specializes in family systems and intergenerational trauma. Your mother and I both see her, separately mostly, sometimes together." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "She asked me to do an exercise," he continued. "She asked me to write down every moment I remember with you, good ones and bad ones. Everything." He pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. It was full of writing. "There are 83 entries in here. Do you want to know how many are positive memories where I was actually present with you? Not just in the room, but actually seeing you, actually caring about what you needed. I waited. 7, he said. 7 out of 83. The rest are either me dismissing you, comparing you to Claire, or just not being there. I felt something twist in my chest. I thought I was teaching you to be strong, he said. I thought tough love worked. I thought that if I pushed you hard enough, you'd become successful. And you did. You became incredibly successful, but not because of me, in spite of me, and I destroyed our relationship in the process. Yes, I said. You did. He nodded slowly. Dr. Patel asked me why I favoured Claire. I couldn't answer at first, but after weeks of digging into it, I figured it out. You reminded me of myself, the parts of myself I hated, the uncertainty, the sensitivity, the need for approval. I saw all of that in you, and instead of having compassion for it, I tried to beat it out of you. I tried to make you into something you weren't. Claire got to be who she was, I said quietly. I had to earn the right to exist. I know. His voice cracked. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Emma. I looked down at my coffee. The apology hung in the air between us, and I didn't know what to do with it. I'd imagined this moment for years. Sometimes I imagined myself accepting it graciously. Sometimes I imagined myself throwing it back in his face. Sometimes I imagined myself walking away without a word. But now that it was actually happening, I just felt tired. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, he said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a relationship. I'm just asking you to know that I see what I did. I see the harm, and I'm trying to be better, not for you, for me, because I have to live with myself, and right now I don't like who I am. I've been living with what you did for 13 years, I said. You've been living with it for 6 months. It's not the same. You're right, it's not. We sat in silence for a while. The coffee shop hummed around us. Espresso machines hissing, people chatting, normal life happening while we tried to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. Finally, I said, I don't know if I can have a relationship with you. I don't know if I want to. I understand, but I appreciate you saying this. I appreciate you doing the work instead of just expecting me to get over it. He nodded. Dr. Patel said something that stuck with me. She said that the goal isn't reconciliation, it's accountability. Whether you and I ever have a relationship again is up to you, but I need to be accountable regardless. That's fair, I said. I finished my coffee, stood up to leave. He stood too. Emma, he said, his voice thick, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say that. I know I didn't earn the right to be proud. But I am. You took everything we failed to give you and became someone extraordinary anyway. I looked at him for a long moment. That's the first time you've ever said that to me? I know. I'm sorry it took so long. I walked out of the coffee shop and sat in my car for 10 minutes processing. Then I drove to my office. It was Saturday, so the building was mostly empty. I rode the elevator to the 7th floor, unlocked my door and sat at my desk. The city stretched out below me, grey and wet and beautiful. I pulled up my email and stared at my father's message. The cursor blinked in the reply field. I thought about what I would say, about whether I owed him a response, about whether responding would mean I was letting him back in or just acknowledging his effort. Then I thought about Sergeant Torres' words from 13 years ago. You get to decide who you become. I could become someone who held on to anger forever, who refused every olive branch, who made my father pay for the rest of his life. Or I could become someone who acknowledged his effort without absolving his actions, who kept healthy boundaries while leaving the door open a crack, who chose peace over punishment. I closed the email without responding. Instead, I opened a new document and started typing. A memo to my senior staff about a new initiative I'd been planning, a program for kids aging out of foster care, a mentorship network connecting them with professionals who'd been through the system themselves. We'd call it the Torres Initiative, in honor of the people who stopped when everyone else drove past. I worked for 3 hours drafting the proposal, outlining the budget, building the framework. When I finished, I sat back and looked at what I'd created. This was better than revenge, better than making my father suffer. This was taking the pain I'd experienced and transmuting it into something that would help other kids like me, like Claire, like all the children who fell through the cracks while adults looked away. I saved the document and stood up, stretched, looked out the window one more time. My phone buzzed, a text from Claire. "Hey, I'm in Portland for the weekend. Coffee tomorrow?" I texted back, "Yes, 10 a.m. The place on 23rd and Burnside. Perfect. See you there." I smiled, full circle. 1 year later, the Torres Initiative had helped 43 kids transition out of foster care into stable housing, education, and employment. Lieutenant Torres came to the launch event. We took a photo together, him in his uniform, me in my suit, standing in front of a banner with his name on it. "I'm just a cop who gave a kid a blanket," he said, embarrassed by the attention. "You were the person who stopped," I said. "That's everything." My parents were not at the event. I hadn't invited them. But my mother sent flowers with a card that said, "Proud doesn't begin to cover it." Mom Claire was there, though. She gave a short speech about her experience with the foster care system's investigation of our family, how it had helped her understand that what we'd experienced wasn't normal, and how it had set her on a path to healing. Afterward, we grabbed dinner at a Thai restaurant in the Pearl District. "Mum asked me if she should reach out to you," Claire said, twirling pad thai on her fork. "She's nervous. She doesn't know if you want to hear from her." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was between you two, that I'm not a messenger service anymore." She looked at me. "But for what it's worth, I think she's genuinely changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but she's trying." "Trying is good," I said. "It's more than she used to do." "Are you ever going to talk to them again? Like, really talk?" I thought about it. "Maybe, someday, when I'm ready, if I'm ready." "That's fair." We finished dinner and walked through the drizzle to our cars. Before we parted ways, Claire hugged me. A real hug, not the performative kind we used to give at family gatherings. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up on me, for seeing past the lie I told when we were kids, for helping me get out." "We're sisters," I said. "That's what sisters do." She pulled back, smiling through tears. "Yeah, I guess it is." I drove home that night through familiar streets, past the BP station on Interstate 84, past the restaurant where I'd gotten a gift card while Claire got a car, past Lincoln High School where I'd been a quiet kid planning my escape. I thought about that 15-year-old girl, the one standing in the rain, soaked and abandoned, wondering if anyone would stop. I'd spent 13 years becoming someone who could answer that question with certainty. Yes, someone will stop. Someone will care. Someone will see you, and if no one else does, I will. I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage and turned off the engine. Sat there for a moment in the silence. My phone buzzed, an email notification. I glanced at it, from David Carter. Subject: no expectations. "Emma, I'm not asking for a response. I just want you to know that your mother and I are moving forward with our work in therapy. Dr. Patel is helping us understand our patterns. We've also started volunteering with a local family services organisation, helping parents who are struggling. I know that doesn't undo what we did, but maybe we can help someone else not make our mistakes. I hope you're well. Dad, I read it twice. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I archived it. Not deleted, not ignored. Archived. Filed away in a folder labelled Family, New Beginnings. It existed, it was acknowledged, but it didn't have power over me anymore. I got out of the car and walked to my apartment. The rain had stopped, and the Portland night was crisp and clear. I could see stars through a break in the clouds. Inside, I made tea and sat by the window. I thought about writing a response to my father's email, about what I would say if I did, but instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the draft of an article I'd been writing for a social work journal. Breaking Cycles: How Adults with Adverse Childhood Experiences Can Transform Systems from Within. I wrote for 2 hours. The words came easily now. I'd lived them, I'd earned them. When I finished, I saved the document and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and go to work. I'd continue building programs that caught kids before they fell. I'd continue advocating for system changes that prioritise children over adult convenience. I'd continue being the person who stopped. And maybe, someday, I'd respond to my father's email. Maybe I'd sit down with both my parents and have a real conversation about healing and boundaries and what a relationship might look like moving forward. Or maybe I wouldn't. The beautiful thing about being the adult I'd become was that I got to decide, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of genuine, hard-won autonomy. I walked to my bedroom and paused at the mirror in the hallway. The same mirror I'd looked into countless times over the past year, always moving too fast to really see myself. Tonight, I stopped, looked, 38 years old, successful, independent, whole. I said it out loud to my reflection. I am Emma Carter, and I chose myself. The words hung in the air, solid and true. I turned off the light and went to bed. Outside, Portland hummed with life. Somewhere out there, a kid was standing in the rain, wondering if anyone cared, wondering if anyone would stop. Tomorrow, I'd make sure someone did. But tonight, I could rest. I'd finally made it home. Choosing yourself is the hardest, bravest thing you'll ever do. It doesn't mean you're selfish. It doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you're finally healthy enough to stop chasing people who never wanted to be caught. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to walk away from family to save yourself, if you've ever chosen peace over winning, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Let's build a community of people who broke the cycles instead of passing them on. And in the comments, I want you to tell me, what does home mean to you now that you've stopped looking for it in people who couldn't provide it? I'll be reading every single comment because your stories matter. Your survival matters. Your choice to break the pattern matters. This is Emma Carter, Executive Director of the Oregon Department of Human Services and survivor of my own story. And I'm telling you right now, you don't have to earn love. You don't have to perform for acceptance. You are enough exactly as you are. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And thank you for doing the hard work of healing. We're not alone anymore.